Bitcoin has this like paradox. It's kind of inherently political, even though it is politically neutral. I wonder if Trump media buying Bitcoin ahead of the strategic Bitcoin reserve, making any significant announcements, maybe torpedoes that a little bit.
You'd think that if the Bitcoin reserve were going to happen, there'd be a whole lot more signaling, but there's kind of this catch-22 because if you're going to accumulate a lot of Bitcoin, you need to do it sort of in stealth mode or all at once.
You would think that if the market took them at their word, maybe this goes to my point about being bearish on the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Shouldn't we already be at like $1 million a coin? Because why would you ever sell Bitcoin if you knew that the US government is going to buy it at any price?
I think this was potentially the biggest announcement coming out of the Bitcoin conference and enablement. Square has 4 million businesses that are using their point of sale terminals and many more locations than that. So being able to turn this on for merchants, it's massive.
Welcome to the Bitcoin Playbook, where we discuss proven strategies for using Bitcoin in your business. I'm your host, Josh Friedeman, and joining me for another roundup episode are Trey Sellers and Jon Gordon. Today on the show, we discuss Trump Media and Rumble joining forces for a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve initiative. We talk about Square accepting Lightning payments at their point of sales and Strike's new lending product. We also take a look at our predictions about the Bitcoin conference from before the conference started. Here are Jon and Trey. Gentlemen, welcome to our post-conference roundup episode. So let's talk about a few stories, particularly related to Bitcoin and business. The first one is this combination of Trump Media and Rumble announcing a partnership, a $2.5 billion Bitcoin treasury. Thoughts there, especially, do you feel like Bitcoin is becoming more and more politicized, or will this not really affect that element of kind of the Bitcoin ecosystem and how people feel about Bitcoin and what it means?
Go ahead, Jon.
Yeah, I'll start and say I think this goes along the trend that was really prevalent throughout the conference, which is the corporate treasury playbook and adopting Bitcoin as a company. And so having access to cheaper capital or cheaper debt, really, through these lines, you see that Trump media taking that playbook, whether it's from strategy, as you saw MetaPlanet, they had Fold speaking to their strategy. Many of the companies, Semler Scientific, that we've talked about on this show and that we're seeing making a splash, more and more public companies realizing, hey, it's going to be wise for us to take on these some capital or debt at a cheaper rate and put it into Bitcoin. So certainly there is politicized nature of it. It should be for all, right? I mean, we did see J.D. Vance. We saw members of the administration, senators from different constituents coming and speaking and interacting throughout the conference. And I think that's to the point where the governments can't ignore Bitcoin any longer. And those that adopt Bitcoin sooner are going to get the benefit of it from a game theory perspective. So I think the media might want to spin it as being, oh, Trump's taking advantage of his position and power to do this. But at the end of the day, any company, and we're seeing many companies take this playbook. And I think it shows too where the meme coins, putting your name and face on that ultimately is a pump and dump. And it's unfortunate to see those kinds of things happening, whether it was a few months ago from the Trump side. But I think here a more sustainable way and for company to get exposure to Bitcoin via these kinds of raises are becoming more and more common, and it just can't be ignored anymore. I don't know what your thoughts are, Trey.
Yeah, Bitcoin has this like paradox where it's kind of inherently political, even though it is politically neutral. And, it's solving problems that are created by the political infrastructure or the political bureaucracy, the monetary system that's run by politicians and, essentially, and insiders there that have power. Even though like it is actually a neutral settlement network and a protocol that anybody can join, anybody can choose to participate in as they see fit. I wonder if the Trump media buying Bitcoin ahead of the strategic Bitcoin reserve, making any significant announcements, maybe torpedoes that a little bit or puts it at risk just because it might make it a little harder to get people from across the aisle on the Democratic side to support a bill if they can spin it as, oh, well, look, we're just doing this to pump Trump's bags and he got this, he's running the tables by getting a whole bunch of money in ahead of this thing being passed when the majority of Americans don't even know this thing exists or whatever, right? It's just taking advantage of the situation for his own benefit. So I wonder if that might have some dampening effect on the strategic Bitcoin reserve, which I think, I don't know if it was the last time that we were talking, Josh, that I'm still a little bit bearish on, and I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess, but like, I don't see like the momentum actually coming there. And I think this maybe puts a little bit more of a headwind on it as well. That said, it's like, look, this thing has been out there. It's very clear that it's a trend that people are coming on board to. It's not like people from the other side of the aisle, whether they're opposed to Trump or not, couldn't just also buy Bitcoin for their own companies ahead of a potential strategic Bitcoin reserve. So that's where this like neutral nature of Bitcoin comes into play. When you understand how it works and what it does, you know that Trump owning Bitcoin or Trump media owning Bitcoin or any private company owning Bitcoin, having it on their balance sheet to whatever size there is, does not actually have any direct influence on the protocol itself and the rules that we all opt into to follow. And that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because Bitcoin, there are things that Bitcoin helps to fix that the right prioritizes and that the left prioritizes. So there's a lot of good that can come from it. But at the same time, it just seems to be only people on the right who are taking it seriously at the moment. And I don't know what that means. Also, to your point, you'd think that if the Bitcoin reserve were going to happen, there'd be a whole lot more signaling. But there's kind of this catch-22 because if you're going to accumulate a lot of Bitcoin, you need to do it sort of in stealth mode or all at once. So I don't know what that means. I would like to think that the United States would get U.S. citizens on board and kind of aware a little bit more of what Bitcoin is. But once again, that gives a lot of leeway for a bunch of other countries to front run the United States. So we'll just have to see what happens.
It is a really weird dynamic that you're talking about, right? Like any other asset that's out there that you want to make a massive allocation to, you're not out there broadcasting, okay, I'm going to buy $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin. It's like, it's very strange. And I agree with you. I can't quite make heads or tails of it in terms of like, what is the actual motivation here and how is this going to play out? You would think that if the market took them at their word, maybe this goes to my point about being bearish on the strategic Bitcoin reserve, is that if the market actually took this at face value and at their word, shouldn't we already be at like $1 million a coin? Because why would you ever sell Bitcoin if you knew that the US government is going to buy it at any price going forward? And I think there still is a pretty big question mark as to whether or not that actually happens to any meaningful extent, which is why we're still at 100,000 instead of 1 million.
So with that being said, we've kind of addressed some of the things that were incorporated in our predictions last episode. So I want to show what Joe Yanni last time had to say for his prediction for the Bitcoin conference.
One more Bitcoin treasury company will be announced. I think one more of these will pop up.
For Joe's prediction, what rating or what grade would you give it?
I think probably an A. I mean, there were certainly many companies announcing more of a Bitcoin treasury strategy. You mentioned we saw PSG in France, soccer club, one of the top in the world, talking about how they've been adopting Bitcoin as a club, and they continue to win and have a strong balance sheet there. Other companies as well, starting to add more and more allocations. You have MetaPlanet there, of course, that have established it, but others announcing strategies to accumulate Bitcoin. So different industries that you may not think have a lot to do with Bitcoin. Well, they have everything to do with Bitcoin because Bitcoin is money and it touches all of our interactions in the economy. So good prediction there.
I'm going to give it a B-, right? Because like we kind of saw this trend continuing of some of the bigger announcements that we had seen in the past, 21 Capital, MetaPlanet, all of these other similar scientific MicroStrategy or strategy, of course, right? But I don't know that there was one big bang of a new announcement that came out, which I think is the way that Joe was thinking about it. Oh, there's going to be some company that comes out and just says, we're buying, 50,000 Bitcoin, or we've already bought it and here it is on our balance sheet.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you have the Bitcoin treasury companies, and then you have companies with a Bitcoin treasury, and I think there is a difference there.
For sure.
I would think that the closest one is probably GameStop, and I think for a lot of people that was a little underwhelming. So I don't know if you would consider that an actual Bitcoin treasury company or not, but it certainly was encouraging to see a lot of people come out and say, "Hey, we're starting to add it to our balance sheet," and that's really important. So Trey, here is your prediction.
Two predictions. The first one is that, so I'm playing in the Bitcoin Golf Championship on Monday. We're going deep. Myself and my partner, we're going deep. We're going to finish top 5. I don't even know how many teams there are. I imagine there's 144 players, so 72 teams or something, but we're going deep. I'm getting one of those prizes. So that's prediction number 1. Prediction number 2, I think we've seen the top of this little run that we're going to correct through next week and the next few weeks. That's going to kind of start with the Bitcoin conference. It's amazing that we're going into this conference at all-time highs, but I don't think that we're going to be lucky enough to see the price ripping into 125,000 during the conference. I don't think it's ever happened in the past where we've had like a raging bull run going during the conference week. So that's my prediction that we're going to see some chop here.
So Trey, what do you think about those predictions?
Well, I am ashamed to say that I did not finish in the top 5 in the golf tournament. Had a little bit of a rough start, and it's just difficult to get back. But it was a great event. Like, highly recommend going to any of the Bitcoin Sports Network golf events that you can get your hands on. I'm sure they'll be doing another one in Vegas next year, and they'll have some others at some other events that are happening. It was a beautiful day, great friends. You get to play golf on a Monday in blue skies and all that, like behind Mandalay Bay. It was really, really cool. I got my other prediction correct, though, which is
Absolutely.
that the price is going to languish here through the conference, kind of range bound, I think is what I said. But, maybe next year I'll just buy some short dated puts ahead of the conference. I feel like this is like the easiest trade of my lifetime every single year. You know exactly when to put on the trade. You know exactly what the price is going to do. You just got to put a little bit of capital at risk there. Maybe next year.
And here are my predictions. JD Vance will be underwhelming. I think that security, maybe not as bad as last year, but it will be overwhelming, at least for that day. And I think that by the end of the conference, everyone's going to be tired of hearing the word Nakamoto. So call me crazy for those 3 predictions, but I think that's probably going to be the case. So for my predictions, I feel like JD Vance was underwhelming from what I've heard. I anticipated this so strongly that I did not show up, and that's partially because I thought the security would be a lot, and apparently it was. And then also, I guess, so for those, I would give myself perhaps an A or an A+. But for Nakamoto, I was actually surprised. I heard it announced. Granted, I wasn't in many of the keynotes and the panels and whatever else, but obviously it was there because it was a maybe like the main sponsor, but I feel like they didn't talk about it all that much. So I'll probably give myself like a C for that. That said, I did skip JD Vance's speech for something that I consider much better, which was the launch of Sound HSA, which is Jon's new company. We did a hike, and maybe Jon, you can talk a little bit about that before we get to the next couple of headlines.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I'm super excited to have launched Sound HSA last week in Vegas. We're connecting sound health and sound money in new ways. We'll be launching a Bitcoin health savings account later on this year. And our first activation was a part of our Move to Earn program. So offering sats for steps. So anyone who walked 30,000 steps during the 3 days of the conference earned 21,000 sats sent right to their Lightning address. And we organized a hike out of the Red Rocks. We had about 25 people out and really enjoyed getting off the strip into nature, getting our steps in. And there's a big component of Nostr to our mobile app. So it's pretty seamless login. You can log in with your Nostr private key or create an account via our mobile app and track your steps in there. And it was great to connect with so many individuals who, whether they're doctors or individuals who care about their health and care about sound money, and really tying those two together. So We really plan on doing a lot of education around health savings accounts and how they can be used. Right now, there are over 38 million HSAs accounts in the U.S. holding $140 billion in value. And we think moving some of that value over into Bitcoin, which is really naturally a health savings technology, to be able to spend for future healthcare needs, can really help individuals as we age, and as there's uncertainty around who's going to be there to pay for our bills. Is Medicare going to be there in 30 years to pay for our new hips? I don't know. Maybe not. But if you're saving in Bitcoin for any healthcare needs, you're taking advantage of the triple tax advantage in the HSA. No taxes on the way in, no taxes on gains, and no taxes when you spend. I think we can see Bitcoin used as not only this store of value asset, as we hear so much about in treasuries, but as truly peer-to-peer cash and its full vision as a medium of exchange. Because if we don't have to worry about those capital gains taxes now, both on the way in and as you gain, it can be a no-brainer to go and spend directly with your doctor, or to go buy that sauna, or other health-related needs that you might have that you can spend out of your HSA using Bitcoin and creating more of a Bitcoin circular economy in health. And that's what I've been focused on with my consulting business, Satoshi Health Advisors, where I've been helping doctors and other health businesses integrate Bitcoin from the merchant side. Here, we're building a consumer tool starting with our mobile app, and you can head to soundhsa.com and download the app for iPhone or Android and get a sense of really what it's like to earn and be incentivized for healthy behavior. So earning sats for healthy behavior, and then ultimately saving in this vehicle and connecting and building community. So having the hike on Wednesday, and then we also had a run for hell on Thursday, raising funds for ALS Network, and introduced Sound HSA to a bunch of folks there. So yeah, it was a really great week and fun place for us to plant our flag.
So maybe at least as far as Bitcoin and business goes, probably the next most important thing, I would actually say this is probably more important than Trump media by far, is Jack Dorsey's Block announcing that they're going to enable Bitcoin Lightning payments at the point of sale. And apparently they're rolling this out in New York City. I guess the question is, do you guys think this will ever go past New York City? Will this be successful enough to where it'll go nationwide? Or do you think it's dead on arrival? Like, it seems like this could either be the death of credit cards, or it could be something that doesn't go anywhere. Trey, do you have any sense of which is at least the more likely outcome?
I certainly hope it goes beyond New York. I think the way that they are rolling it out makes sense in terms of making it default on all Square terminals, that it's enabled, that it's turned on to allow people to pay with Bitcoin. And then the default is also on the merchant side, is that it converts 100% to dollars, right? So from a business adoption standpoint, they really don't have to do anything other than upgrade to the latest version of the software, and voila, anybody who comes in the door will see a pay with Bitcoin option there, similar to the way that when I walked into Steak and Shake the other day, I was able to just pay with Bitcoin, and it was just part of the main flow there. The merchant doesn't have to do anything different. And then if they decide they want to hold some of that in Bitcoin, or keep some of it in Bitcoin, not convert it all to fiat, then they can move that slider over toward 100% to be able to actually accept sats. So I'm optimistic that the way that they're rolling it out will allow it to have a little bit more staying power. Hopefully that moves beyond New York fairly quickly, so that I can get a chance to try it out. I know for a fact, like my local brewery that I go to on a fairly regular basis, they use Square terminals. So I'm excited to buy a beer and pay with Bitcoin and just kind of show the people around me what I'm doing there. Will it kill credit cards? Absolutely not. So I don't think of this as a either or type of thing, right? Sure. Bitcoin is like spending cash, or maybe a closer equivalent is like spending from a debit card. So there is a very large part of the economy where people are not using credit. They're not using credit cards to pay for their goods and services. They are using cash, or they're using debit cards. And so that is a much closer corollary to the competition that Bitcoin brings for people who want to hold it and take advantage of its increasing purchasing power over time. That instead of using cash or instead of using a debit card, they can use Bitcoin. I think for a lot of people, they will opt for continuing to use credit to pay for their goods and services. And then maybe on the back end, they're starting to use Bitcoin to pay off the credit card, right? And so you're still using Bitcoin to pay for all of these things. You're just also using the credit network that has such wide reach and ability to already be integrated into all of these different businesses, and has some benefits to it, actually, right? Like you get to hold on to Bitcoin for an extra 30 days if you use credit, and maybe you get some points back and do all this other stuff. So there's going to continue to be a mix. I don't see that changing. But just having the ability to do so at the point of sale easily is really the biggest unlock from the Square announcement. And even though I kind of would, generally speaking, opt for credit and then paying off my credit card with my sats, at least at first, I will be spending Bitcoin at these places. I'll be showing them the love on like, here's why this is a good thing for you. Like I want them to see that volume, see that flow, so that they can start to think about, why this is a good thing.
Yep. Jon?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is potentially the biggest announcement coming out of the Bitcoin conference and enablement. Square has 4 million businesses that are using their point of sale terminals and many more locations than that. So being able to turn this on for merchants extremely easily, and as Trey mentioned, on default, and then where the merchant gets to toggle with, hey, do I want to convert back into fiat? Do I need to pay my bills here? Or can I save some of this in Bitcoin and go straight into my treasury? It's massive. And there are many other tools on the market that have come into place that can enable point of sale, but ultimately this is going to be the quickest onboarding for many, many businesses, your local coffee shop, your breweries, your restaurants. And I always love spending Bitcoin to support those businesses that are accepting Bitcoin and can offer some fun rewards along the way, whether that's in Bitcoin rewards. And I think just seeing that paying Bitcoin as an option is something that's needed to embed in our subconscious, that this is an option and that, hey, maybe I should learn about this Bitcoin thing, and it can have less friction from a transaction perspective. So as they roll this out later into 2026 and are testing it out, they'd already had a feature where merchants could convert some of their cash or credit coming in fiat into Bitcoin. It really is a huge unlock and make it easier for our Bitcoin meetups all over the country to orange pill those places where we want to spend in Bitcoin. And it's not a separate device or a separate terminal. It's embedded in their day-to-day operations and makes it easy for staff where they don't even, and the Steak and Shake is pretty hands off, right? It's like you don't really need to know. It's kind of embedded into the tech stack of the company and to limit the potential points of failure there. So kudos to Block, and recommend everyone watching Miles Suter's talk about that announcement, along with the fact that they've been earning up to 10% in yield on Bitcoin locked in Lightning channels. They're one of the biggest routing nodes in their C equals implementation there. And both from the Cash App activity, and then now with more and more Square terminals that will be coming online, they're routing more and more Lightning payments. And Nick Bhatia wrote about this 6+ years ago, about the Lightning Network being the opportunity cost of capital, and the Bitcoin that you put into channels and potentially being able to earn off of routing fees can be weighed against other uses of Bitcoin. Because if you have Bitcoin in the Lightning channel, it can't be used for anything else. And so that announcement that was in Miles's talk as well, alongside the merchant adoption unlock that they have, were both massive. And they had turned on Bitcoin payments in 2013, as he said, but there wasn't the consumer, the demand side ready, to spend Bitcoin. And now that we have so many great interoperable Lightning wallets, and we have more wallets coming back into the US that initially were left due to regulatory pressures last summer, whether that's Phoenix or now even Wallet of Satoshi talking about a comeback into the US market, I think there's going to be even more and more tools to use Bitcoin in day-to-day commerce.
Yeah, the psychological impact of however many millions of people going up to swipe their card, even if they don't choose the Bitcoin option, but just seeing that it's there, it's very normalizing to people in their mind, especially when they see it multiple times in multiple different places. Just like, oh yeah, even if nobody's really using it, it almost doesn't matter at first, because the fact that people are just seeing it there as part of their normal checkout flow is much more psychologically impactful for people to just begin to think about Bitcoin in the way that they generally think about money. Like, we Bitcoiners think about money in a very deep way and understand that money is different than just what we're using to pay for eggs at the grocery store. This payment use case is only one aspect of it, and in fact may not actually be the most important aspect of good money. But that's not how the majority of the population views money. They view it in the way that they interact with it, generally speaking, which is spending their credit on their credit card at Costco, right? And so as this becomes more normalized, it's kind of a backdoor into people thinking about adopting Bitcoin for their own use, whether or not they fully understand the actual use case and problem that Bitcoin is solving, which is not really the payments use case directly. It's the indirect, sound money aspect of all of this. But meet people where they are, and that's exactly what this does.
Are you guys more likely to pay in Lightning, or are you guys more likely to pay with Bitcoin if you know that they're going to keep it? Like, does that factor into your decision at all? Do you just want to support the fact that Lightning is being accepted, or is it that you want to support businesses that also see the value of Bitcoin? I feel like it can go either way, but would you be more likely to pay in Bitcoin if you knew that they're keeping that Bitcoin?
I don't care if they keep it or not.
Yeah.
Honestly speaking, like, would it be better? Would I feel better if I knew that they were keeping it? Absolutely. And I'd, pat them on the back. But if I knew that they were going to do that, then there wouldn't need to be this backdoor Trojan horse to enable it on their kiosk, right? Because they would already be looking for a solution that would enable that so that they could get more Bitcoin. In my mind, like, it doesn't matter what they're doing for it. There's no like selling pressure on the other side. Sure, maybe they sell it immediately, but I'm just going to buy it back to to replace the sats that I just spent. So that comes out in the wash, and they're getting use out of Bitcoin in a way that works for them. That is the important piece. Bitcoin is a tool, whether it's used as a store of value, whether it's used as a superior medium of exchange. Look, we're just trying to exchange value for goods and services across an economy. Bitcoin is a superior tool for that in a lot of regards. And so they get to experience that, whether they're going to keep it or not. It's a good first stepping stone.
Yeah. John, it looked like you were nodding a second ago. Yeah. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, no, those are all great points. And I think at the end of the day, it's up to the merchant. And I personally, as a consumer, would hope that the business I'm spending Bitcoin with is saving in Bitcoin, at least a portion of it. And at the very least, the 2 to 3% that they've saved versus having a credit card transaction fee going to that processor, that's a benefit to the bottom line. So whatever that percent is, between 1% and 100% that you save in that transaction, for my consulting clients, I definitely advise to try to hold more and more of that in Bitcoin as you can, but recognize that every business has different margins that they're operating with, different vendors that they have to pay, and cash flows that they're working with. So I think as the businesses grow and get more payments in Bitcoin, and as it grows above 5, 10, even 20% of their payments, then they're going to have to look at maybe converting some. But as early days and you're getting, assume a smaller number of or percent of Bitcoin payments compared to fiat, you should be able to save those in Bitcoin. So I think I definitely love to hear from the business owner themselves and where they're at, and have that transparency to know that they understand Bitcoin and the value that it can bring to their business longer term if they are saving in Bitcoin, even to a small extent. And the most efficient way of getting Bitcoin, rather than the 1% exchange fee from fiat, is going to be collecting it directly from whatever good or service you're selling into the market. So I think as a consumer, I definitely like to support those businesses. And you'll often find products that you won't be able to find in the mainstream or in a Costco, because they're built by smaller Bitcoin entrepreneurs. Even one example being an Alpa bar, which is a pemmican bar that I brought on the hike for all of our users, and Sound HSA hike attendees. And this is an entrepreneur out of Colorado, and it's a super simple product that you can't find in the store. And that was, another example, and it's on the Oshi marketplace. So those types of products and services that are already leveraging Bitcoin for many different means, I think we'll see this spreading out and becoming more mainstream, again, to all of those Square terminals that are available.
So how big of an announcement do you think it was that Strike now has this? When I was talking with someone at their booth, it's a 9.75% interest rate Bitcoin-backed loans. Do you guys see that as a big thing? I know people were interested to see what they're going to announce. How much of a needle mover do you think this is?
Take a look at the table of rates that they have listed on their website. It's 9.75% if you reach a threshold of like $250,000 or something on principal, and it goes down maybe as low as 9.5 if you're talking about like 5 million or $10 million or something like that. So it's still north of two digits, like in the 11 to 12% as I recall. If you are doing what most plebs are doing, I would imagine, which is borrowing anywhere from 10,000 to 150,000 or something like that. So just throwing that out there. I think it's a great thing that more people are coming into the Bitcoin-backed lending space. Unchained has been there doing this type of activity for a very long time. We currently are focused on commercial Bitcoin-backed loans and don't offer consumer or personal loans. But more competition coming in, more capital coming in, more options coming in is always good for the end consumer, whether that's a business or an individual. And it will put downward pressure on rates over time. That will make things even more competitive relative to fiat financing options. And as that happens, there'll be more and more people who are able to take advantage of using their Bitcoin as collateral for Bitcoin-backed loans. So it's all positive. I definitely think it's going to be, I'm excited to see what the uptake is in terms of Strike's lending operation and what people like about it and don't like about it. And all that. I have to throw this out there because, obviously I'm a little bit biased and Unchained offers these commercial Bitcoin-backed loans. There's still nobody who keeps you as close to your collateral as we do, because you are holding it in collaborative custody vault with a key that you control as part of that. And so, this is not related to Strike. It's not related to Unchained. It's not related to any of the other options, Ledin or whatever, that are out there. Just make sure that you understand the different points of nuance in what you are getting into. Make sure you are smart about the amount of leverage or risk that you're taking. Just be careful out there.
Yeah, that's a good word of wisdom. So, John, I want to get your thoughts in just a second. But Trey, if I remember correctly, last year when we were on stage together, the whole Bitcoin-backed loan thing, I mean, it makes sense that you brought that up as something you were interested in because you're at Unchained. But do you feel like things have, I guess, last July, so, 10 months ago, do you think things have moved as far as you had hoped in the last 10 months? Is this kind of like the slow progress that you expected, or do you think that we'd be further along by now?
No, I think it's kind of right on track from what I would expect. I still maintain that the banks are coming, but they're coming on their own due time. Like they still, I don't think banking institutions, commercial banks who have the lowest cost of capital on the planet, aside from the US government itself, I don't think they look at Bitcoin-backed lending as some grand opportunity where they're leaving so much money on the table if they don't move quickly. It's just not a big enough market. People don't hold enough Bitcoin. They have plenty of other opportunities to make loans in the traditional fiat world, which are so much bigger and deeper, and things that they already have processes in place and understand. I don't think that these banks are looking at Bitcoin-backed lending and thinking like, oh my God, licking my chops at potential 10% interest rates or something like that. It's just not how they move. Even if they were doing that, these things are massive behemoths that take so long to do anything new. And so I still think we're a few years out before the actual banks come to play for Bitcoin-backed loans. But we are starting to see some of the traditional finance money come into the space with the likes of Cantor Fitzgerald and some of these other players. So it's not that there's none of that movement. It's just that the big groundswell or tsunami of capital that could come to play is still going to take some time.
Yeah, I agree with all that, Trey. And I think the companies like Unchained, then you've been doing it for years with no collateral lost. I mean, it's unbelievable. And focusing on businesses in recognizing Bitcoin as pristine collateral as it is, and you can hold it in these more unique setups, and you have visibility into it. And the traditional banking system, especially when you get into the real estate and mortgage side of things, do not recognize Bitcoin. Again, we touched on this a bit, but as a source of capital or liquidity for the individual borrower. So I think seeing Strike coming out with a consumer product, driving the rates down as much as they can, as what you guys have tried to do, is important. And recognizing that risk profile and the trade-off absolutely is really important. But it can be strategic for an individual to not have to sell their Bitcoin and to take on some more fiat liquidity, and you have plans and ability to pay that back and have some, get some cash in the door now versus having to sell your Bitcoin at price levels around 100K when we think what can happen, hey, in the next year, 5 years to Bitcoin. So more options, the better, and let the market and individuals decide. But certainly the legacy players are going to move slower. We know they can do it. The guardrails are coming off, but there's going to be many committee meetings and bureaucracy involved with any of the major rollouts. But it's a move in the right direction. And I think as the policy and legislation opens up, whether that's on the Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac side in recognizing Bitcoin, or now here on more of, with SAB 121 getting repealed and going into SAB 122, less of a risk of dealing with Bitcoin, and it turns into, hey, we're eventually going to need our Bitcoin product to be out there to be competitive with other banks, and Bitcoin becomes really the core, trustless entity or asset underneath a global banking system where we've seen, really significant cracks recently. And when you look at the bond markets in other countries, whether that's Japan, for example, at 250% debt to GDP, and recognizing they're in a worse position than Greece, but also holding a lot of treasuries that they might sell off, and kind of seeing what happens again on this 10-year yield and longer end bonds as it relates to this lending market, which is ultimately governments borrowing to try to pay off their own debts, is something that we'll need to keep a close eye on.
And listen, on the banking side, like, it's probably most likely that Bitcoin becomes an asset that they recognize that can be on their customers' balance sheets that they take into account when they're looking at other types of loans, right? It's like you were mentioning this, John, that like if you're trying to get a mortgage as an individual and you go to your bank and say, okay, I have $5 million worth of Bitcoin on my balance sheet and that's all I have, they're going to look at you and be like, okay, well, you don't have a job and you have no other assets. Like, we can't lend you any money. Whereas, now most people is going to have a mix of assets on their balance sheet that could be weighed against other assets that a bank might be considering. But just the recognition that Bitcoin is liquid enough and stable enough, not from a price volatility standpoint, but just a staying power or longevity standpoint, that it is something that is just part of the financial fabric of the world. When they start to recognize that and bring it into their underwriting criteria as a legitimate asset that can be held on a balance sheet, that is probably the lowest hanging fruit for where banks will start to actually play in this. And you're not going to see that in the form of direct Bitcoin-backed loans. You're going to see that as, hey, I'm underwriting this person and I've taken into account that the fact that they own $1 million worth of Bitcoin as part of their net worth. And perhaps over time that lowers the cost of capital to a particular individual if they own more Bitcoin, because they think about it as this liquid asset that could be used to cover or secure a loan on the back end. But that to me seems like the fastest path forward, and is in all reality, from a bank's perspective, a very legitimate way of adopting Bitcoin into a framework and just making it part of the thing that they do on a daily basis, which is underwrite loans.
Mm-hmm. So as we're finishing out today, as you're sharing where you like for people to go to find out more about what you're doing or read more of your content, whatever else it is, also share any maybe rumor or announcement, because we know announcements aren't anything until they become reality. Rumor or announcement that you hope comes true that you heard at the conference.
Oh, John, go ahead. You're really putting us on the spot here.
Yeah, well, definitely check out soundhsa.com and join our wait list for the HSA. That'll be rolling out, and you can download the app now and earn some sats for steps. And then my other website, SatoshiHealth.com, where I'm helping businesses integrate a Bitcoin strategy. Love to connect with you through there on X or Nostr at the Bitcoin Yogi. And let's see, a rumor could be, well, we had an announcement around Pakistan adopting a Bitcoin strategic reserve. So I think if that happens, it's another country that we can add to the global game theory of starting to mine Bitcoin, use some of the power that you have, whether it's hydropower or solar, to mine Bitcoin, and continuing to see the hash rate explode upwards. I think is something that doesn't need to be announced or have any rumors, but is sort of the backbone to a lot of what we're seeing in the global game theory play out. I think seeing a little bit more around the country adoption, from almost 4 years now from the original El Salvador announcement at the Bitcoin conference in Miami in 2021 is something that I hope to continue to see come to fruition.
Well, yeah, you took the one that I was going to think about, which is this Pakistan announcement.
It's huge if it's true.
It's huge if it's true, and especially for that part of the world, which is so close with gold. You'd love to see them adopting a Bitcoin strategic reserve in conjunction with whatever gold they hold, and as individual people are looking at that, that's really important. So there's one other thing that I wanted to point out that I thought was just so impactful from the conference, and it came from Stacey Herbert as she was closing out a panel with Max, and they were talking about Panama potentially adopting Bitcoin as well. So see if that comes to play. But as she was walking off stage, she said, "Buy Bitcoin, not exposure to Bitcoin," and I just felt like that was a gut punch to a lot of people if they were paying attention, because there has been so much fervor and excitement and eyeballs on the Bitcoin treasury companies, these hedge funds that are coming to play to just buy Bitcoin and create leverage and take advantage of the fiat financial system and this arbitrage opportunity that exists in leveraging those different tools that are out there. And I just think it's really important to emphasize what she said there as being let's come back to what we all came here for, which is that we're trying to fix the money. And you can't fix the money by just buying Bitcoin treasury company stock, right? The beautiful thing about buying Bitcoin directly is that you get Bitcoin exposure and you also get the actual Bitcoin and all the other benefits that come from holding on to a secure asset that you can directly control. And none of that applies to the Bitcoin treasury company stock, even if they are to outperform in the short run. You got to ask yourself, to what extent is that outperformance needed to make up for all the things that you are giving up, the trade-offs that you are making from not actually holding Bitcoin? So just something to think about as we close out. You can follow me at ts_hodl on X and go check out my newsletter, firebtc.substack.com. And with that, we're good to close it, I think.
Sounds good. All right, well, guys, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. Well, friends, it's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Bitcoin Playbook. If you want to reach out to either me, John, or Trey, you can find those links down in the show notes. And if you have an HSA and you like Bitcoin, check out Sound HSA. As always, keep building, keep growing, and until next time, keep living and leading well.